scheduled meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on the 4th of May. A warm welcome to those who are attending by Zoom and those watching on the live stream both now and perhaps subsequently. And it's a particular pleasure. We will be welcoming Craig Naylor, the new Chief Inspector of HMICS. It's good to welcome a number of people from Police Scotland. I'll touch on that in a moment. We have no apologies from committee members, although I think Katerina Kasper is just about to join us. She's not here for this introduction. We have Police Scotland. I'm slightly disappointed to learn this morning that DCC Fiona Taylor, DCO David Page and Alan Spears will be unable to attend the private session because there are some very important issues coming up in the private session, although it might be that they can rejoin us at some point. And just as an indication, and particularly for those attending who haven't necessarily seen the agenda, the intention is that we will have dealt with all of the items in public session by 12:30. We would recommence at 1 o'clock and intend to have dealt with the rest by 15:30. So you can see that that is quite a tight and busy agenda. And on that basis, could I encourage everybody to be quite focused in their questions and answers and comments? I don't want to preclude debate, but you know there is a lot of business to get through. In the normal way, it would be appropriate if he would be so good if I drop off the call. Grant McRae would step in and chair the meeting until I get reconnected, but I hope that won't happen. So if we move on to item 2, declarations of interest. No declarations have been notified in advance, but just if I could confirm to members. No, thank you very much indeed. Moving on then to the minutes of the last meeting, which have been circulated and which are online. This was an exceptional meeting that we held in March, and just as well we did, I think, if you look at the number of items of business that are on this agenda. Any comments? What I would like to suggest is one small addition. At the bottom of page 4, it was a management action and a discussion at the committee that actually there should be a review of that management action. Police Scotland undertook to revisit it to confirm, as we've said here, a commitment to a framework around implementation planning based on good practice rollout and feedback. It's been pointed out to me that that may not be sufficiently clear. And particularly for external readers, it may be helpful if we just expand that. So it was to confirm commitment to a framework around implementation planning based on good practice, including, and I incorporate the recommendations from the internal audit, definition of measures of success, links to strategic outcomes and reporting arrangements. So my suggestion would be include that for the avoidance of doubt. Okay. Committee members, are you content with that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I think that would be helpful. As I say, it's been pointed out to me that might not have been as clear as it might otherwise have been. With that amendment, is everybody content to approve those minutes? Yeah, thank you very much. That moves us on then to the rolling action log, and indeed the first item on the rolling action log actually relates to that management action. The expected date of completion was indeed now, so that's 6 weeks since the last meeting. I think we would have expected that revised management action to be with us. Can anybody, not sure, can anybody offer a reason why not, but can I particularly ask that we need that I would suggest somewhat in advance of our next meeting. Is there a reason why not? Who does this? It was Tom McMahon, who's not obviously with us. DCO Page, does that sit within your thing? Or DCC Taylor, maybe that sits with you?
He's one of mine. Thanks, Jane.
Right.
I'll speak to him, and if it's okay with yourself, I'll provide a written note to the committee with an update on that, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, could we have that by, where are we? Could we have that by the 1st of June?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. The other thing I might comment on, and I think it's a comment as opposed to an action, there was an, in the minute, Police Scotland identified a new improved approach to strategy development could be demonstrated in the forthcoming strategies in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion and violence against women and girls. I think could I invite then DCO Page that you might look at the annual police plan. I recognise this is an issue of timing, that we were talking about this just 2 or 3 days before the annual police plan came to us. But if you look at page 23 of the annual police plan, I think you'll see that this is not quite in the same mode, or not taking quite the revised approach that we'd hoped, and that according to this, the approval and delivery of the strategy is expected in Q1, which means it would be complete by the time you get to our next meeting. So could I invite you to look at that?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to look at the, obviously don't have the annual police plan in front of me at the moment. But,
fine. As an action arising from this meeting, that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Committee members content, because that was a very important discussion that we had. Katrina.
Sorry, Chair, I was actually going to move on to another item on the rolling actions, but okay. But yes,
go for
very
it.
Content, thank you.
Thank you. So the interim report will be brought to September, but with that update. Overtime and allowances proposed ongoing. Again, that had been thought expected date for this meeting. DCO Page, any? Was that expected date ambitious?
So I'm just looking at that at the moment. Thank you.
It's on page 2.
Yeah, got it. So my machine's lagging, unfortunately.
Well, could you perhaps update us in the same vein for the 1st of June? I think that might be helpful.
Yes, happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you. Estates management. I don't know, Katrina. Well, let's go through them in this order, if I may. That has now been open for 15 weeks, where it says estates are currently working on producing our existing governance structures into one document. How difficult is that? 15? Does it really take 15 weeks? Question. It's proposed ongoing. DCO Page, could I suggest, could we have that for the 1st of June as well?
I will get you an update on that one as well for the 1st of June, Chair. Thank you.
Grant, I know this has been a matter of some interest to you. Are you content with that as a revised date? You're on mute.
Apologies, I'm keen to see some progress on it. So yes, if in the update coming by the 1st of June, if we could actually have a revised action by date, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Data quality and integrity. This Katrina.
I see there's a proposal to close this. My question is, should we be agreeing to close this before we've had the discussion, or should we wait till we have the discussion, which is happening later today?
Yeah. Fun enough, I'd noted that down. I think I'd be prepared to close it in this form, although my note was further action may follow today. So I think you're right. let us close it as it stands because the framework is provided for today, but we may well have further action to arise if you're content with that. Yep. Thank you. Audit Scotland Improvement Tracker, and there's a fair amount of detail. Information on themes and benchmarking activity, the latest have been included, proposed to close. That seems appropriate. We'll pick that up in consideration. Katrina?
Sorry, it's a tiny thing. I'm assuming that's a wee typo right at the start. Future report do provide, or future reports do provide, or future report to provide. Sorry, just a wee.
Future reports. No. There we go. Any offers, DCO Page? I think that might sit with you. Or no, perhaps it's Alan Spears. Is that right? Yes, Alan. It would be you actually.
Thanks, Chair. I think Donna, who's come in with me this morning as audit manager, was going to offer a comment if that would be okay. Thank you.
Please do, Donna.
Thank you. Yes, future reports will provide that. So I can clarify that later on when we've built it into our reporting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to be so pedantic, but
not at all. And the final one on themes and dependencies. The up-to-date position is more detail is now included in relation to dependencies. And again, I feel that's one that's appropriate to close. We'll pick up in the consideration. Are you content? Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. And then finally, by way of this introduction, we should be deciding for the rest of the agenda. Are the committee content to take items of business 7 to 10 in private? We'll do a slight reordering, and those who are to be involved are aware of that, but currently the decision on taking things in private, yeah, for the reasons stated. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so moving on, I'm 3 minutes over my time, I apologise, but let us now move to item 3 and to extend a very warm welcome to Craig Naylor, the new Chief Inspector of HMICS, whom I hope is now admitted into the meeting. I certainly saw him online waiting to be admitted.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
And see you too. So a very warm welcome to this committee. Occasionally, your predecessor has appeared and spoken to us, and this is an excellent opportunity, and I think very timely because you've just published your first scrutiny plan, and indeed your first 3-year scrutiny plan. So the floor is yours. You'd like to speak to that and anything else that you'd like to mention.
Thank you very much for the very warm welcome, and good morning, committee and everyone else. I'm both delighted to be here and delighted to introduce the scrutiny plan. I will use a number of slides to take us through where we are. And I'm aware that Jill has previously spoken to you. I'm very keen to maintain that relationship both with this committee and with the wider board. I think it's not only polite but of value that I bring to you every report I publish and have the chance to allow you to look at it, to understand it and to ask questions appropriately of what we've found, what we're recommending and how we would hope to work with the force and yourselves to improve policing across Scotland. So if you don't mind, I will share my screen if my technology will work. Hopefully I can make this happen.
Yes, indeed, we have you.
Hopefully, so I can't see anything now. Hold on, there we are. Right. So as you said, Chair, quite rightly, this is the first 3-year plan from HMIC on scrutinising both Police Service of Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority. The reason that we've moved from a 1-year plan to a 3-year plan is to do the good practice thing of giving Police Scotland and yourselves a very early heads up of where we're going to go, understanding what our communities are saying, what police officers, members of the board and staff members from the SPA are saying, understanding what government are looking at, and trying to get to a position where we're looking at emerging themes and being able to address them in a timely manner. So this year's plan is very much and I can claim no credit for it because the team had done all of the work prior to my arrival. So very much pay tribute to Jill, the existing team, on what they've done to do the biggest consultation exercise, the biggest consideration of the factors affecting policing just now that HMIC has ever done. This bubble diagram, I'm not going to go through the detail of it because it would take me all day to talk about what we've done. But it just gives an indication of the areas that we've looked at. So the consultation and engagement is particularly of interest to me. We've spoken to either personally or electronically over 200 people, both members of the public, police officers, police staff, senior management, over 70 interviews with senior managers across the service and across the SPA to come up with our consultation and engagement. We've also done what you would expect us to do around Pastello analysis, looking at other inspection bodies, both within Scotland and externally, looking at public areas of interest, what are the Justice Committee at Parliament looking at, understanding what our colleagues in HMIC FRS are doing. They're a very different organisation to us, but trying to inspect the same issues that we do, but in a slightly different way. So what can we learn from them? Looking at Police Scotland and the SPA's own risk registers, the areas of concern, your dependencies, as you've spoken about already this morning. And then probably most interestingly for me, coming from very much a crime background, is that Police Scotland threat assessment. What does the threat of the future look like, and how does the service prepare itself for that? So we've done a lot of work to develop the plan for the next 3 years. And this graphic really describes the areas of work that we're going to do. So in this current year, I'll break into the detail of where we are this year after I discuss this slide. But in this year, we are already working on the contact assessment model, a strategic workforce plan, joint inspections of custody, work around the first ever inspection of health care within the custody environment, which is something which Jill and I certainly believe is crucially important to make sure that we get effective custody healthcare services. We're looking at community justice, so that wider look at diversion from prosecutions with other partners. And then later in the year, we're going to go into some real areas of contention around organisational culture, particularly with the violence against women and girls argument, the misogyny type discussions that are now playing out heavily within the Scottish Parliament, and how that affects the service delivery around domestic abuse, which we're currently looking at. The other thing that we do need to do is to consider again the role of a frontline police officer. We will look at mental health demand. One of the biggest areas of comment we had in our consultation was the rapid change over the last 3 to 5 years of other services failing and requiring the police to pick up the demand. Now, that particularly comes out around mental health, whether that be responding to mental health incidents or even dealing with members of the public who have had a mental health incident and not being able to pass them on to a suitable place of care within the health service, and ending up with significant amounts of demand on police officers to keep people safe while they're waiting for an appropriate health response. We've not done the work on it yet, but I know this is an area of significant interest to both the Justice Committee, to yourselves, and down south as well, and something we will look at probably at the end of the calendar year into the early part of 2023. The organisational culture bit, legitimacy is a key aspect of policing in Scotland, and that consent to deliver a service is something that is held very proud and something I'm very keen that we protect and understand. So understanding the organisational culture, understanding how misogyny is dealt with, understanding how equality and diversity is looked at, is something we will do a lot of work on later in the year. As you can tell, this is a very ambitious plan for this year, and I've got to say I was slightly concerned that my resources are not quite well enough established to deliver that. We are doing well and we're on track with everything at the moment. However, we will have to recruit this year. And I know the difficulties Police Scotland have just now with pension implications. So that may give me a fruitful pool of talent that is currently leaving policing that may wish to come and join us. So with every cloud, there's a silver lining, Chair. I hope you will agree. Moving into next year, again, we have set an ambitious target. I didn't touch on the adult and child protection services inspections that we do with the Care Inspectorate. They are ongoing. They will continue into next year. They're a significant focus and are well established, but significant in terms of the impact they have on the services provided to children and vulnerable adults. Next year, we're going to look at some wider issues, again, around domestic abuse, more looking into the prosecution aspects of that and working hopefully with the HM Inspector of Prosecution. We're going to look at strategy and performance. We're going to come in again and have another look at conduct. Missing persons is always a challenging area of business, one which has got the very, very clear ability to trip the service up. And we want to come back and have another look at the SPA forensics, despite the fact we've looked at them recently. We think there's a very good news story to tell there, but we do need to come back and just check on the progress there. Cyber and online fraud, a white hot area at the moment, growth in everything you can imagine. And I think learning from what is happening in England and Wales is something we will need to do to make sure that Police Scotland continues to progress and to deliver against the growing demand in that area. Looking at 2024, it is slightly less ambitious because I suspect by that point we'll be looking to bring some other areas back into consideration or even to review what we're doing. But if we have no change between now and then, which I severely doubt, we will need to do another crime audit. We did one in 2019 and it was, in comparison to England and Wales, very good. We want to make sure that as the new crime operational system lands within the service, that that's being used effectively and efficiently, and that the way that crimes are recorded meet the needs of the victims. We're very alive to the issue of drugs deaths in Scotland and the challenges that the whole of the society faces. And we want to have a look at how drugs harm reduction, using all of the aspects of policing capability, but also looking into the partnership areas. We want to have a look at that. I would hope by then that David Strang's report on drugs deaths and drugs deaths task force will have published, and we'll have a better understanding of what the public sector is doing to address harm reduction within drug using communities. And then people development, public contact and operational support are areas that we know are high profile, require significant investment in both the people and the capabilities, and we want to make sure that they are being run efficiently and effectively. Again, we're a bit of time off that. We're two years off that, and I'm sure things will change between now and then. But that at the moment is the ambition based on the information we got in the consultation. Into a bit more detail, this is this year's current plan and workload. Domestic abuse phase 1 will be published in the summer, so I suspect end of July, beginning of August. We will look at how Police Scotland responds to incidents of domestic abuse, how they prepare cases for court, how they safeguard the individuals who are reporting these matters and the children or other people involved in that, and publish that in the summer. Contact assessment model. I know that the SPA has been very heavily involved in the management and oversight of the contact assessment model rollout, and we will produce our thematic review on that again, hopefully slightly earlier than domestic abuse one in July. Work is very, very much ongoing with that. We're having superb cooperation from Red Cross Police Scotland, from C3 Division, from local policing and from specialist crime and from corporate services. And the information we're getting back is very good. There will be some areas for improvement, but I'm not going to go through the detail of that because we haven't had our gate review on that yet, which is next week. Strategic workforce plan, again, June, July time for publication, depending on maybe a couple of slips of interviews. I suspect the end of June to the beginning of July. Strategic workforce planning is a challenging area for all public sector organisations, and some places like the Health Service seem to have a far better way of understanding the threat and the issues that they face, possibly because they've got better information systems on these issues. But one of the things that we will be talking about is the first publication that we can find in policing in the UK of a strategic workforce plan. It's not the finished article, and I think it would be fair to say that there are some areas for improvement in that, particularly around understanding what shape the organisation wants to be in the future. And there's some work to be done to address that. What I've got to say, though, is the first stab at this, I think, was a very valiant stab, and it has done things in a way that Police Scotland's not done before. And likewise, it has done things in a way that we can't find in England and Wales. So we're trying to find good practice. We're trying to find good ways of doing this type of business, and we're not finding it. We are doing a deep dive into some forces force management statements that they provide to HMIC FRS to see if there is that sort of transition between demand, workforce as it currently is, and what the workforce for the future might look like, to see if there is any learning we can take out of that in this space. But again, as I say, there isn't a ready reckoner that we can show, you know, here's a good one, and this is how you would develop towards a good one. So I think a lot of work for all of us to do on that area of business, and one that, you know, I've certainly spoken to most of the DEPs and the DCO about all of our concerns about making sure that this is a suitable product for the future is key to the development of programmes within the service, and is seen as the route map to take us forward to delivering effective services within the budget envelope that is currently in existence. And I think that really is about all I wanted to talk about in terms of our scrutiny plan. And Chair, I'm very, very happy to take questions or to follow up in writing if that is more appropriate. Oh, you're on mute.
That was indifference, deference to presentation. Thank you very much indeed. That was most informative. And I mean, as an overview, I particularly welcome both the topics and the explanation of the rationale for the topics. And I have to say, they absolutely resonate with issues raised by this and indeed all of the SPA committees and the board. So I don't think there's anything in there that we wouldn't warmly welcome. Very useful to have your thinking about how you're going to proceed, very clear explanation. And as I say, I particularly welcome and thank you your offer, or if not commitment, to bring every report to, let's say, a committee. It may be this committee, it may be another committee, and that's something we'd discussed earlier with Gillian. So hugely welcome that, and hugely welcome the 3-year, the attempt to do that 3-year planning. So with that, I'll throw it open to other members. Katrina.
Thank you. Good morning, Craig. I really just wanted to say hello and to absolutely echo what Jane said. I really enjoyed reading this report. I think it's really clear. It covers issues that we have raised as being really important, and your presentation there, because added to that. In fact, you even mentioned one thing that I wanted to ask, which was just a slight kind of surprise that equality, diversity and inclusion wasn't actually mentioned in the report, unless I missed it somewhere in the print. But you did mention that as being part of what you're including. So yeah, just welcome and thanks for that. Very, very, very interesting.
Thank you very much. And equality, diversity, we see as a golden thread through virtually everything we're touching, particularly organisational culture, particularly domestic abuse for part 2, mental health issues. Everything we will look at will have an aspect of equality, diversity and inclusion in it. But thank you for your comments.
Yeah, and that's something also that the internal audit on strategic planning, which you heard referred to earlier in the minutes, also that was a key theme of that. So this all fits together, it's beginning to fit together in a really coherent manner, which I hugely welcome. Grant.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Craig. We haven't met either, so look forward to meeting you in person in due course. But can I also endorse the comments of my colleagues? I thought that your paper and presentation were extremely helpful and very informative, so much appreciate that. In the course of your presentation, you mentioned you have got constraints about needing additional resources in there. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you aim to tackle specialist resources, such as new areas such as cybercrime, where clearly this is new territory for everybody to some extent, and where and how you're going to get the relevant skills to help you carry out your review.
Thank you. It is a big challenge. We have a dedicated team of 5 lead inspectors who are, one is a seconded police officer, the other 4 come from various different backgrounds, one being a former police officer, one having worked in local government and sort of audit and inspection, a former procurator fiscal, a strategic inspector from the Care Inspectorate. We have a team of associate inspectors that work with them. I shudder to say the word 0 hours contract, but they are contracted to work a number of days with us per year. And it's almost like a call-off contract with them where we bring in their skills and resources. When I arrived, there have been a number of people who have either come to the end of their contract, and it's either a 2-year or 4-year contract, and there are a number of others who've intimated that they're either about to resign or retire for various different reasons. So I am down to a very, very shallow pool of talent, very good people, but a much smaller number than I would want. We currently have, I think it's 8 associate inspectors, and we'd normally run with a complement of between 16 and 20. So we are hopefully going to advert in the next 2 weeks for associate inspectors. And I've got 2 ways of bringing them in. I've got either the fair and open, transparent process, which is what we will advertise next week, or I can bring people in for a 2-year contract by submitting a business case to Scottish Government. That tap on the shoulder type approach will allow me to go and speak to some of my former colleagues in both the cybercrime world within the National Crime Agency, where I was previously, or indeed to look at people with a really good background in culture and equality and diversity from colleagues I have and work very closely with in England and Wales. I'm really keen that we spread our understanding of the policing issues wider than just Scotland. So bring the expertise from colleagues down south who have worked in this space, who've done good things, and build that capacity. So build my 8 back up to 16 to 20, some on a 4-year contract, some on a 2-year contract, some through open and competitive process, some through their previous knowledge and experience of how they've delivered services that we are looking to inspect.
Thank you very much. That's extremely helpful, and good luck in the recruitment.
Thank you. It's always a challenge.
Yeah. Strikes me as strategic workforce planning and a recruitment strategy in the beginning of the campaign all in one. Thank you very much. Now, we have Katerina, I think, is on the phone, so I can't see her, but I just wanted to double check with her. Katerina, did you want to offer any question or comment in this space?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here indeed. I've been listening. I've been following on live stream as much as I can. I'm hopefully close to being able to join through the laptop. But no, nothing from me. Just a warm welcome as well. And I really appreciated seeing the 3-year plan. And I think I don't want to reiterate what colleagues have already said, but it is definitely extremely exciting to see that, yeah, what's in store for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Karen, I'm going to ask you to take up with Katerina. I think we've got a little bit of logistical difficulty in hearing her. You might be able to deal with that, but thank you very much. But Craig, thank you so much. I mean, any questions for us or any comments or observations you'd like to offer?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose it may be worth just repeating a bit of a conversation I had with SPA Chair Martin Evans on my first couple of days in appointment. I think, you know, having been away from policing in Scotland for nearly 6 years, it's very pleasing to come back and see a very different landscape around the role of the authority, the effectiveness that you are showing, but also the stability within the senior service, the senior team within Police Scotland. it's a very different environment to the one I left a number of years ago. The challenge that Martin and I have set each other is not just to provide scrutiny of the police service, which is much better than it previously was, but also to be acting as cheerleaders when things go particularly well and building the service up. So, you know, one of the things I sat and watched from NCA offices last year was the effective delivery of the COP26 programme. You know, in a way that I don't think any commentator on policing would have had an expectation to have been delivered in the way it was. I put that down to significant effective planning by Bernie Higgins and his team, by really strong leadership from the whole service, but also to a way of working that Police Scotland has that particularly reflects on human rights, the rights of the individual, and keeps challenging itself. The work done during COVID with John Scott and the Independent Advisory Group, again, really good evidence of strong and effective challenge and practice that is really good. And I'm really keen that we continue to do that. So Martin and I have agreed that we will legitimately cheer from the sidelines when things go well, as well as scrutinising the organisation in an effective manner. And I think building that partnership, building an ability to come and speak to you, to be asked questions on what we're doing and how we improve the legitimacy of the service across Scotland is something I'm very keen to do. So delighted to be here and very happy to come back whenever you wish.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to add a little bit to that jigsaw of COP26 because we're in the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, and saying that we also, and this was only occasional, I wouldn't say we do this on a very regular basis, but we did it with contact assessment as well, is to stand up a special oversight group chaired by Tom Halpin, and Michelle Miller and I were members of that, but I entirely endorse what you said about COP26. I think it was an exemplary process and outcome. So this seems an absolutely splendid start to our new relationship. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll look forward to seeing you both at this committee and in various other committees and the board, and very much look forward to working with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And if you don't mind, I will stay on because I've got an interest in some of the things you're going to be discussing. Thank you.
So I would hope. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, so if we move on then to internal audit update, the improvement tracker, and from both Police Scotland and the SPA, the internal audit progress update. Gary Devlin from ASETS, our internal auditor.
Thank you, Chair. In introducing this report, this is our usual progress update that informs the committee of how we are doing in implementing the approved audit plan that was approved by the committee over a year ago now. Just to say, I think I've trailed quite well with members of the SPA, the committee and Police Scotland, that my role within ASETS Group has changed, and I'm taking on a UK national role within ASETS Group, and that's necessitated a change in how we're going to manage the delivery of internal audit services to Police Scotland and the SPA. And Elizabeth Young, who was one of the top 35 accountants in the UK not that long ago, or named as one, and was promoted to partner in ASETS Group at the beginning of the year, and is known to you, having previously worked as a director on the audit, will be taking over as partner, leading the delivery of internal audit to Police Scotland and the SPA. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be around if you need me, but you're in capable hands, I think, with Elizabeth, and we've also appointed Rachel Weir as Senior Audit Manager, and Rachel has also previously been involved in the audit. So with that introduction, if I could hand on to Elizabeth Young, who's going to talk you through the report.
Thank you, Gary. I just wanted to start by saying I'm delighted to be back working with you again and to see some familiar faces. It's nice to see you all, and hello to those of you who I haven't met before. As Gary has already trailed, we'll be handing over responsibilities, and effectively this meeting is the point at which Gary will see out the 2021-22 plan, and I've already started picking up the 22-23 audits. Rachel and Matt are also handing over responsibilities, and Andrew will be continuing as part of the team. So hopefully From the committee's perspective, you won't see any difference in terms of the handover process. As I say, it's already in flight. Just to go to the report itself, we, the committee, have in front of you on the agenda the final reports from the 2021 and 22, and also our annual report, which Gary will cover last. So we've completed all of our work for 2021-22 on time. We've also begun planning for 22-23 audits. We've got 3 of those that we're currently just finalising the arrangements for: an audit of vetting, 1 on core financial systems, and 1 on business continuity planning. We're intending to start the fieldwork for those imminently once we get agreement on the assignment plans, and so the committee will see the final reports for those audits at their next meeting. That's really all I was intending to say on the progress report, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
No, thank you very much indeed. We were aware, in fact, this is a committee, I think, where it marks a transition in almost every area of personnel between HMICS, assets. We will be moving on with auditors. We'll be making some internal changes. So quite a moment, but I think very pleased to hear. And as you say, Elizabeth, you've actually completed all of the internal audit reports that were in plan for this year. Thank you, Gary, and the team, and that allowing Gary to produce the internal audit opinion, which he'll speak to next. So that all seems, I am content and satisfactory, but any questions from committee members? No. No. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good introduction, a good welcome back. Thank you. Are you or Gary then going to speak to the next, which is simply the progress on that Police Scotland and the SPA have made, although I note what your comments are. I mean, you can assume we've all read it, but want to speak to that briefly, or Gary?
Andrew, actually.
Andrew, sorry.
I'll hand over to Andrew. Thanks, Chair.
Andrew.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Chair. It's the disadvantage of turning up mob-handed, I think.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if that was me.
That was me. Oh.
Yes, just to touch on the follow-up report, again, this is one of our standard reports. The main observations I would make for the committee, taking the report as read, is that we see a continuation in the general positive trend in the reduction of the number of outstanding actions. That's been the case over the last couple of years, with a bit of a spike, mostly attributable to COVID. You will notice a little bit of an uptick in the number of open actions, but I would also observe that the vast majority of those 30 of the 36 that are currently open have not yet fallen due. That more reflects the timing of the last couple of batches of reports than anything else. If we turn to the overdue actions, the oldest of them relate to our reviews of data protection, specifically for the SPA, and a couple which relate to the benefits realisation review, which we carried out. Both of those are, to a large extent, tied to wider organisational or infrastructural issues, which are in train, and we have received satisfactory progress updates against those. I'll probably leave it there because the report, I think, generally speaks for itself, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, Andrew. It's really in relation to the revised timescale for implementation of these recommendations, that in most cases they've rolled forward at least a year and sometimes a bit more. How confident are you that the revised timescales will be met?
Always a difficult question to answer.
Sorry, Grant, I think that's really one for management to answer. I think maybe Donna Adams or David Page would be best placed, or possibly Lynn or John, because it is management's action plan and management's commitment to it. It's difficult for the internal auditor to know.
I do appreciate that, Gary, and perhaps to some extent I should have addressed it to management, but clearly in preparing the report, you must have had some sort of discussion with them, and that was really just to try and tease out just exactly, are we on track? But happy to listen to management's views.
Yeah. So, Alan, I think your management in this respect for Police Scotland.
Thanks, Chair. So we obviously came in quite a significant journey where, for periods of time, we've often set timescales which weren't always realistic or necessarily achievable. So we now put an awful lot of effort into not only looking at our management response, ownership, but also timescales for delivery. And I think when you look at the report that we'll present in a few minutes, you'll see that on the whole, we're achieving those recommendations within the timescales. And it is my role to link in with other parts of the force to try and ensure that, one, the timescales are realistic, but secondly, we are achieving them. So we certainly set out, we think they're very smart at the outset, and I'm confident in the large part that we are achieving the timescales that are set.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you. And John McNellis, I think, for the SPA, is that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on our two overdue actions, I mean, we also meet regularly with Andrew and the team in the vets, and they do hold us to account on what we're doing for follow-up and the revised timescales. I think that the committee knows there's been a lot of challenges with the data protection items, but I think we now can see light at the end of the tunnel. We've now went through the procurement process for the training modules that we require, so I'm quite confident that by June we will have completed those actions.
It may be, since we've asked for a number of updates for the 1st of June, this may be, we could add that to the list, that one from yourself, just a quick update. Could I ask a question, I think, therefore, of Police Scotland, in the action status by report, procurement and tendering, there are 2 open in Q4, but were due to complete by the end of Q4, that is the 31st of March. I would like to know whether those are complete, and I say that particularly because there are a number of procurement and tendering issues that we are looking at both later in this agenda, and of course Resources Committee are looking at procurement all the time. So could I just have a quick update on that? DCO Page, you may have the best update on that, I'm not sure.
Donna will probably have the best update on that,
Okay.
Chair, thanks.
Donna.
Good morning, everyone. I think we did actually close those at the end of Q4, and that is what we're reporting. So we do have all of the evidence that we've presented. Just, I think maybe Andrew and I just need to meet up just to confirm if you need anything else. But yes, we have completed on those.
I thought it may just be an accident of timing but reporting, but just wanted to check on that. Thank you very much. Let us know if it is not. I think you can do some exception reporting, as it were. Okay. Anything else on that report? If not, we will move on to the tracker 3.2, which is Police Scotland's Audit and Improvement Recommendations Tracker. And Alan, you're putting this, of course, as usual, take it that it has been read, but is there anything you would particularly want to highlight or correct or add?
Thanks very much, Chair. We've done a bit of work on this report and looked at some of the other reports and tried to align this a little bit better to a dashboard report. So I'm really grateful for the work that Donna has done it, and for that purpose I brought her with me to the meeting this morning. So I would maybe just allow her to make a couple of comments on the report by exception, and then between us we'll take your questions.
Okay, Donna.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So as Mr. Spears has said, this is representing a new style of reporting for us, and I'm hoping that you will agree that it's maybe clearer for you to get some assurance on how we're managing and progressing with the recommendations. So just a quick overview, we've got 112 recommendations that are open at the end of the quarterly reporting period. We added 15 new recommendations since the last report, but of course we are adding all of the time. So since the end of March, we've been adding all of the new internal audit recommendations that ASETs have produced. 10% of the recommendations have have a high risk status, and that usually fluctuates between the 10, 12, 15%, even up to 20%. So it's sitting relatively low at 10% right now. Of the recommendations that were due to complete at the end of March, we achieved 90% of those recommendations, and that meant 26 out of a total of 29 were achieved on time. Now, I personally think that that is really quite good, and it shows that we've got really quite a good management grip on these actions. Of course, some things don't work out the way that we intended for them. We maybe don't have sufficient evidence that shows what we've completed in time to satisfy our internal auditors or HMICS, and we maybe need to do a little bit more work. But what I can give you assurance on, just because we haven't achieved them, it's not to say that there hasn't been a substantial amount of work undertaken and already underway in relation to those actions. We're reporting 41 closures within this period, and that is provided later on, starting at slide 9. So it's slide 9 on the pack that you've got. And as per the actions within this committee, you asked for further detail in relation to themes, dependencies, and I have provided a little bit more detail in relation to those. Moving on to the delayed actions, because I know that that will be of interest to you. So in total, we have 15 recommendations that have incurred delays. That works out at about 13% of our total recommendations. 9 of those were new delays reported in Q4 relating to the crime audit. So we originally had these recommendations down for completion by September. Because of delays with the full rollout of the national crime system, we may not have all of the evidence available at that time in September to discharge these. That's not to say that we don't have milestones in between that time that we will be still working our way to complete, and we'll be reporting our progress on that to HMICS and also to other committees. I think the Policing Committee receives those updates as well. Okay. So within this chart, I've broken it down by the delays by risk, so you can see that we don't have any high risk recommended at the time of reporting, and I've also shown by portfolio as well. So the highest concentration of delays are sitting within the crime and operations area, and that is largely due to those 6 that are relating to the crime audit. So that kind of gives you a little bit of extra context. The next few pages are breaking down the delayed recommendations. So all 15 recommendations are displayed there, and it provides a reason why they have been delayed. So don't intend to go into that, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So moving on to the closures, we've submitted 41 for closure at this time. And a significant proportion, or over half of them, have been in relation to internal audit. You can see the ones that we have closed that by risk, so 8 high risk, 27 medium risk and 6 low risk. So we're really continuing to concentrate on completing those that are the most important. And we have, and I know in the past I have provided a description of what we've done, what we've achieved, and the impact of that work. I haven't done it for this report simply because there's quite a big volume of recommendations. We are now more routinely reporting through the other committees on the status of the sort of whole action plan, if you like. So we are able to deliver updates in relation to hate crime, crime audit, online child sex abuse to the Policing Committee, and giving a lot more detail on those recommendations that we've completed and what has been achieved, and those that are still ongoing. So I didn't think that it was necessary to provide that sort of level of detail here. Moving on to the next page, this is in relation to the themes and the dependencies. Now, this is, you have asked for more detail in relation to the themes that we have and the dependencies. So what I have tried to do here is show you a breakdown by theme. So whenever a recommendation is added to our tracking system, they're always allocated a theme. And that allows us to look across all of the recommendations that we are adding to the system and identify if there's any sort of corporate governance themes that we need to address. So maybe lack of guidelines in relation to something where we've had high concentration of compliance related recommendations in a particular area. We have worked with that area to help them build quality assurance frameworks, etc. Where we have seen recommendations requiring better practice or process reviews, we have been able to direct them to other departments within Police Scotland that will be able to help them implement those recommendations. So that is how we use the themes. What I would say is the themes, the ordering of the themes haven't changed significantly in the last year. They kind of usually are around guidelines. The most interesting thing is last year we reported that of the number of recommendations that we had in that guidelines category, 40% of them were high risk. When I've looked at the figures again this year, that has reduced by less than half. So it really shows that we have been tackling that document set, the strategies, all of the procedures that sort of govern what and how and why we do something.
Donna, I'm it's all right. I'm just going to interrupt you if I may, because I'm just conscious we're tight for time. This is all incredibly interesting, but I wonder, it strikes me, because this is the first part of a new reporting and presentation, which I must say I found very clear, very interesting, but I think it merits, as it were, we need some reflection time, think about things. So I wonder if I mean, there's nothing, I think what you're saying in summary is there's nothing extraordinary and concerning. We're definitely on track in terms of a reporting. This is more detail of reporting, and I think my suggestion is it would definitely benefit from some consideration with SPA staff and pulling out as to the level of detail and perhaps some reflection. But I'd like to then just ask committee members, if I may, if they have any burning questions for you arising out of this, and we can think about any comments. So I don't want to, I'm afraid, cutting you off in your prime a little, but it's just because it's so interesting. We could spend a great deal of time on this, and we do need to have some reflection, but perhaps just not entirely at this point. So I think key questions and comments from my colleagues, maybe Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, Donna, I would congratulate you on the way you've actually pulled this information together and presented it. I think it's very helpful, very clear. What I think might be helpful going forward is to understand if there were any particular barriers you found in actually getting the outstanding items dealt with. For example, you mentioned on themes, that there's a sort of question mark as to how you can best implement things. I wonder if in looking at any particular item, and I'm not expecting you to answer this just now, if in fact there's a geographical issue where it's not working so well in one part of the country versus another, whether you're able to actually use people from another part where it's working well to actually help speed up the implementation and develop best practice in another. So I think if we could learn anything about you felt going forward in future reports, any particular barriers or particular successes would be a great way of looking forward. Thank you. But congratulations on that report. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. Katrina, anything from you? Nope. Thank you. Katerina.
Nothing from me, thank you. I've got some smaller suggestions, but I can take them offline, maybe with our officers. So thank you.
Yeah. No, well, I think generally, Donna, thank you very much. It really is immensely improved, sounds as pejorative, but it's very clear, very helpful additional information. And there's a lot to get our teeth into, I think. But I think for the moment, on the assurance side, what we're looking for is assurance. And you've given us a lot, both about work undertaken, and I think we particularly want to see the outcome is that these have been closed off. And if we refer them back to the internal audit report, it is that internal auditors have confirmed and corroborated, in effect, what you say, that there is satisfactory progress with the management actions. Would that be a fair summary, Gary, Andrew, of that, Elizabeth, of that relationship?
I think it is. I think that is a fair summary of it. We're actually very impressed by the Police Scotland process for monitoring actions. They do take it seriously. I know that our report highlights some slippage, but they're well cited on that too. So I think that's some assurance for the committee on that process.
Yeah, no, thank you very much indeed. So thank you, Donna, Alan, and your team. So if we move on then to SPA audit and improvement recommendations, somewhat less dense, but that's because of the volume. John, just again, we have all read the papers. Anything you want to highlight?
Yes, just
how to adjust.
A couple short highlights. First of all, on the business plan. So this is our, in effect, annual report on how we've done for the last financial year, and we're delighted to say that we've achieved 93% of the milestones that were in our business plan for 21-22, which is a huge achievement considering it was our first real challenging business plan, but also because of COVID and some of the challenges with Omicron, actually getting that level of achievement has been fantastic, and we're delighted with. There are a few remaining milestones, but all of those have been picked up and considered as part of our business plan for the forthcoming year. Other highlights, which is a little bit different for this report, we've provided a progress update on best value. So again, happy to say that we have completed our first full self-assessment of best value, and now we're taking forward some actions to decide how we address where there's gaps or areas that we can do with some improvement on. Those were the key points, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Any questions from colleagues? There are many fewer outstanding recommendations because, in fact, as we reported last time, you had closed off a number of the existing recommendations you reported last time. Any questions from colleagues? Grant, Katerina, Katrina?
It's not really a question, it's just a kind of commendation, really. Yeah, well done.
Yeah. No, this is a very congratulatory meeting. Hopefully, as we run all the way through this thus far, and indeed, let us move on then to 3 new internal audit reports. Sorry, Grant, you have your hand up.
Thank you. It's just, I would also congratulate the clarity of the presentation. I think it would be useful as we move forward to know if there are any clear barriers, particularly in being able to demonstrate best value. It's clearly a very topical area of concern to most public sector organisations, and it would be useful if anything was coming up that suggested we weren't able to demonstrate that in a particular area, we could pause and reflect on how we can do it differently. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Grant. We'll look at that area. We're now looking at how we address what those gaps are. So certainly something that we can have a look at, and we're due to report back to the committee in a couple of months' time of how we're getting on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So if we do move on to the 3 new internal audit reports, and now, Gary, it might be you, but it might be Elizabeth, or indeed Andrew.
I think the first one is ICT, Chair, is that right? So that's Ashley Bickerstaff from our ICT team. Sorry, there are lots of us on the call. It's
That's
because
good.
of the range of reports. So if we could hand over to Ashley, he will talk you through that report.
My apologies, Ashley. Welcome, and please take us through the report. You know, take it as read, highlight, add, adjust, comment would be very helpful.
Thank you, Chair. So we completed a review of the ICT service delivery and kind of focused on kind of the 4 key areas: governance arrangements, looking at performance, the oversight of performance, service level management, including like service catalogues, service levels and reporting processes, stakeholder engagement, which included the demand planning, service quality and resource management. On page 2 of the report, it kind of details at the top of it, the graph, which shows the 4 areas that we've looked at, 2 of which assessed as amber, 2 as yellow, with the graph in the bottom showing the 8 improvement actions that were identified throughout the review. So I've just taken it as read, bring your attention to kind of some key messages kind of coming through in the report. First one's around kind of performance reporting framework. That there isn't one established within the digital division. Service levels are in place for incidents, but not all aspects of service delivery. For example, service levels aren't in place for response times for service requests at present. Following on in the service requests place a significant demand on the digital division's resources, and there's need for better classification and management of the service requests. The service requests can range in scale from a simple change of someone's access right up to the kind of the implementation of a new ICT system. There is need to kind of break these activities down to enable a more effective management of the activities, which also ties into the earlier point of defining the service levels for these such requests. The last 2 areas kind of go hand in hand in some respects, which is demand planning and resource management. Demand planning and prioritisation activities are not formalised within the division. And although resource planning for projects is in place, other aspects of ICT service delivery, such as business as usual activities, are not formalised and planned. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Very clear, and those messages does strike me. This is in relation to ICT, but has much wider application in respect of all areas of service provision, as it were. But that's a follow-on, as it were. So dealing with this specifically, and we have management actions, and they are all essentially accepted. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Grant, I know you had some, I think.
Yes, thank you. The 2 questions really. One is in relation to the actual delivery dates for action, some of which are quite well ahead. And I wondered whether, in fact, that's because it's viewed as being very difficult to actually put these into place, or whether there's another reason. And secondly, in your paragraph on best value and be able to demonstrate best value, has there been much discussion with the division on how best to go about gathering the right information to be able to demonstrate best value going forward? Thank you.
And those are management responses, I think. Would that be?
Yes, I think in both cases these would require management responses rather than from Ashley, but from a combination of the 2, we appreciate comments.
Hazel, you had your hand up, and Andrew Henry. I don't know in which order I should take those. Hazel, you came first.
Yeah, sure, that's fine, thanks, Chair. So being part of the audit itself and carrying out the work with Ashley, there was a lot of consideration given to the timescales that have been wrapped around each of the management responses, and some of the areas that we do think we can deliver on and deliver improvements in fairly quicker time some of the responses also feed into where we're having to consider more tactical implementations versus wider strategic implementations as well. So as an example, as part of the EPF work that we're doing in that EPF programme, digital division service catalogue also forms part of that, as well as within this audit. So it's trying to make sure that we've got the right approach to delivering where we can get improvement, but making sure that we're not necessarily jumping ahead when there's a more strategic deliverable kind of coming down the line. We've also had to take into account the fact that as a division, we're, how do we implement the continuous improvement type activities that are outlined in this audit versus business as usual versus transformation, and that the kind of keeping the lights on elements as well, because it is all of the same kinds of people that are doing that. So that's the reason why some of the dates might feel like they're a wee bit further out than some of the others, because we've tried to weigh up all of the demands that we've got within the department and the division and make sure that we can achieve the goals that we're setting ourselves within this management response.
I think my question would be, why is this not business as usual? I mean, it seems to me what the auditors are saying is this should be some of these things, not necessarily all of them, but should be when I'm thinking of things like audit trail. So I wonder about that. But anyway, noted. Andrew, and then maybe I'll go back to Grant. Sorry, Gary, you've got your hand up as well. Andrew, then back to Grant in terms of his feeling, whether that addresses his question. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, Hazel covered most of my points. I just think, at a summary level, there's a number of strategic bits of work ongoing across the operating model and other programmes of work that, are linked to some of the outcomes here. I think, simply put, I think that the kind of demand on the division, given its enabling capability as well as its BAU keep the lights on activity, is probably a prioritisation activity that we have to look at. I think the dates in here are probably realistic on the basis of, I suppose meeting the recommendations fully, but we expect to gradually be improving against these management actions, through the course of the period. In regards to the best value activity, there's various conversations going on around that. We do have, a considerably complex procurement and contract landscape, and also our service delivery model into the organisation. So there's two angles to that, and both are being progressed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Gary Devlin.
Maybe just very quickly, Chair, really to answer Grant's question from an internal audit perspective, the way that we shaped this report, forgive me a little bit for Hazel and Andrew, but it felt more like a reactionary service, and we were trying to shape an action plan which would move it more to, some part of it will always be a reactionary service, but move it more into a planned, proactive service. And the way that we've shaped the action plan and really helpful management response from Hazel and Andrew is around being able to demonstrate best value. So if all of those actions are implemented, you will see a much clearer performance management structure and framework and reporting around the performance of the ICT service delivery, and that will translate into being able to make good, strong management judgments on the extent to which that service is delivering best value. So we're trying to move the service along that way, and as I say, a very helpful management response. You can see that it's very detailed. Management do get this, but it's a big job to move it from the current position into that much more managed service, that much more business as usual. So that's the internal audit perspective on the report. Hope that helps answer Grant's question.
Yes, can I come back in and say yes, it very much does. And I do appreciate from presentations that Andrew and team have made elsewhere about the difficulty in recruiting people with the right skills to be able to move forward at the pace you would like to move forward. I think it's important that the organisation as a whole understand the various steps in the journey, shall we say, to getting to the point of moving from reactive to proactive and be able to demonstrate best value very much as the way Gary has described. So I would just encourage you to proceed to implement the plans as rapidly as you can.
Andrew, you have your, or is that a legacy hand?
No, it's a new one, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gary's comments. I think, that kind of reactive piece is also a wider cultural bit that we have to, tap into as well. Given it's, given digital is a key enabling service, when we look at the change portfolio, for example, and other activities across the organisation, also the nature of policing as well, there's always going to be an element of reactionary behaviour in there. But there is strategic bits of work progressing through now, such as the 5-year business plan, such as DDICT refresh. These will all contribute to that more strategic aspect, which hopefully will kind of overshadow the more reactionary side. But to Gary's point, that will always be there as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I do recognise whether it's simply in reactive mode, whether it's in proactive mode, whether it is in business as usual, change, transformation. If you take all of those together, prioritisation and demand management is the issue. We see it elsewhere. For example, take on an assurance, a risk and assurance side, we see it particularly in forensics. We know that the demand that is there in various aspects. So I mean, I do appreciate the challenges, but getting our head around that and just how we prioritize and demonstrate the criteria for prioritization, I think is one of the key things. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, Katerina or Katrina, did you have anything on this particular? If not, thank you very much indeed. Let's move on then to SPRM, the second of the internal audit reports.
Yeah, so these next two reports from internal audit are being introduced by Andrew Diffin, who's
Andrew.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to take the two reports in order then, the first of them is on SPRM, the staff pay and reward modernisation. Just to kind of establish context on this one, the committee will likely be aware that this has been, for the organisation, for Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority, a very long-running piece of work, about which members of the committee and various other governance groups will no doubt have seen no end of reporting in terms of progress and outcomes and so on and so forth already. Which brings me to the scope of this review. So, given that this has been the focus of so much scrutiny so far, our intention was essentially to give a little bit more of an independent view on the delivery of the benefits, on the approach to carrying out this exercise and so on and so forth, and then to look at that transition from its implementation as a project into that business as usual sphere. So to take a little bit more of a forward look and perhaps less to rehash over the speed bumps that have been along the way. So I'll commence with that. I'll also caveat up front that at the time that this review was carried out, Police Scotland were carrying out their own post-implementation review. You will see the timing element of that reflected in the one finding that we did raise and the management response to it. There was a reluctance on the part of Police Scotland to share the detail of what was going into the post-implementation review with us in the course of our work, for the simple reason that hasn't yet been reported through governance. So we didn't want to put ourselves in a position where we were reporting things to this committee that would appear in a report subsequently go to a different governance group. So we've tried to thread that needle as best we can. Generally, however, the report is a positive one. The kind of core finding is that we've seen good evidence that the benefits that were articulated in the original business case have been delivered. We are happy with the general approach to planning it as a project, taking into account its significant scope and scale, and it's not a unique exercise, but it's certainly not something that any organisation will do regularly. Most organisations will find themselves having to do something of this nature maybe once or twice in their lifetimes. So it's important when you're faced with a situation like that to ensure that if there is an established approach, you use what you can of it rather than try and reinvent the wheel. We saw really good evidence of that. We saw the use of external expertise. We saw significant attention devoted to engagement and consultation across every stakeholder you could think of. There was a lot of care and a lot of attention taken to both making sure that the process itself was fair and also that it was seen to be fair. And there was a really strong commitment that came across from everyone we spoke to consistency, that once the process was established and outlined, everybody stuck to what they promised to do and saw that through. So the one main recommendation that we did make was, prior to us carrying out our field work, there had been a lessons learned exercise carried out. It had reported and produced some lessons learned. We saw evidence of those being shared within the project management function as things to take into account for future projects. We recommended that those be developed into an action plan. The management response, as you'll see there, is that is intended to form part of the post-implementation review. So we haven't, as I say, we haven't seen that yet, but I think from a Police Scotland point of view, they regard that as complete, and we'll follow that up next time we follow up. I would likely pause. Just to add a couple of other quick points just on best value. Again, we saw a really good commitment to best value throughout the project. It's articulated in best value terms from the original business case right the way through the project documentation, the plan and the implementation. There's obviously a couple of core points to that, one being the general point about efficiency in terms of having this harmonisation of pay and reward processes across the whole organisation, and also the best value angle to the equality and equal pay element, which is obviously there's a basic equality principle in the sense that people should be getting equal pay for equal work. There is a bit of a financial risk, however, to the organisation if it doesn't follow that through. So this implementation of a consistent set of pay and reward system really helps Police Scotland and the SPA to demonstrate that they are taking that commitment seriously, and it's maybe a little bit appropriate to think of it in cold commercial terms, but it does provide the organisation with a little bit of insulation in terms of its exposure to the risk of equal pay claims further down the line. And sorry, yes, I will pause there and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. What a very positive assurance review to have, and how gratifying after, as you say, one recognises the speed bumps. There have been the obstacles, whatever you care to mention, but to have come through to this point, and with a report like that, an independent report like that, I think is really very positive indeed, and great tribute to all the Police Scotland SPA personnel who worked on that over a quite extended period. But yeah, particularly. Any comments, questions, queries from my colleagues? Grant?
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to say, as you've mentioned yourself, that it is very good to read such a positive report. It was a very long journey, and it's good that we've arrived at the destination with such a positive set of outcomes and lessons learned for, hopefully, there won't be another need to have an SPRM process for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from Katerina or Katrina? No? Okay, no. Thank you very much indeed. Very, very positive. Congratulations to everybody on that. And finally, in terms of new internal audit reports, health and safety. Andrew, is that you again?
It is, Chair, yes. So just pick this one up there. So again, taking the report as read, there's maybe a bit more to chew on for this one. We have raised a number of higher risk issues in this report. However, I think it's important to state that only one of those is an operation finding to do with the actual implementation of processes. And for the areas that we looked at, we didn't find any legislative breach or any area where standards weren't being adhered to. The focus of the findings is much more around kind of governance and reporting, and it's really about the ability of the health and safety function and all of the various areas to which it delegates, particularly monitoring functions, to be able to demonstrate that those processes are working well, and communicate that to governance. So I think that's kind of the key point. We've raised a few things around there which are about information gathering, a few things about clarity of responsibility. So where the health and safety function itself is, it's only so large. There are only so many people. They can only do so much directly. It does need to delegate a few things, and a couple of probably fairly chunky points about improving reporting. So considering what it is that governance and management groups need to be seeing, and refining what I think at the moment is quite extensive reporting down into kind of key messages that allow management and governance groups to draw conclusions about the effectiveness of the controls that are in place. As I say, though, there is quite a lot of detail in there to chew on, so happy to expand on anything if that's.
No, I think that's very helpful to have that summary of the messaging thing. Katrina.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew. That was really helpful. I think one of the things I noticed was the timeline for. I mean, I take on board, that the management has taken on board the recommendations. I mean, for health and safety to be, this in this kind of situation is a wee bit concerning, isn't it? And I guess, although I understand what you're saying in terms of a lot of it is about, procedure and things, but there's a date for the management action, the policies and procedures. There's a date given of March of next year. And I suppose that just seems quite a long way away. And that also impacts on the management action in terms of H&S induction and refresher training. So the action 1 about updating the health and safety policy, again, action 1 March 2023. And I just wondered if there was a reason for such a long time scale.
I believe that is to tie in with an existing policy review cycle. Where we're making those observations, what we are tending to see is not that it isn't clear or isn't agreed between various parts of the organisation where responsibility lies, more that if there is documentation that doesn't necessarily reflect that, or what it reflects isn't exactly what's occurring in practice. So it's kind of a very, very common message from internal audit is either do what your policy says or change your policy so it reflects what you're doing. This is one of those situations. It's not that these things are an obstacle to people taking on and carrying out those responsibilities. It's more that clarity within the policy structure isn't quite there. So I believe that the dates that have been set are to tie in with the existing policy review cycle for that structure of documents.
Yes, okay, thanks. I suppose I'm still not clear why it couldn't be accelerated to deal with what is clearly a risk at the moment.
Katrina, sorry to cut across, but I think that is a management response issue again, rather than, the understanding from the audit team is to tie in with policy reviews, but the question you're really asking is that reasonable is a management judgment?
Okay, yes, it is, of course, thank you, yes.
And so it would be helpful to have that, because I agree, I have the same issue, and particularly if what Andrew is saying is some of it, not all of it, is simply a matter of updating an audit trail, and that really shouldn't take as long. I can see the updating of policies might, but I can't see that the updating of sort of manuals necessarily would be. So to answer Katrina's question now, there's a hand up there. So who is that offering? I think to answer Alan Spears. I think that might.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll just offer a couple of general comments. We've obviously came through 21, 22, and I'll invite James Bertram, who is our health and safety manager, to comment behind me if you can indulge me. I think part of the challenge is we have a very small health and safety team where throughout the last 12 months our focus has been one, COVID, and secondly COP26 and a turnover of staff. So it doesn't come as a huge surprise to the organisation that some of the recommendations are focusing on governance arrangements, training arrangements, and again, there's a real reliance on health and safety affects everybody in the organisation, and what we want to ensure we do that is when we make a change to policy, it's embedded and it's understood across the organisation. So there's probably a cautious approach to ensuring that when we say we've delivered on that, we have done that, and we didn't want to address some artificial timescales. I hear the observations from the committee, and that's certainly something that the team, we can sit down and just look at those timescales. But if you don't mind, I'd like to invite James just to offer a comment as our health and safety manager.
Thank you, James. Please do.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, we have obviously accepted all these recommendations. There is a fair bit of work in some of the aspects, but they're all in train at the moment, and we would hope to report back in advance of these dates.
Yeah. That I think would be most welcome. So I think as an action, I'm not actually saying that they should be revised, but I think consideration to the timelines, and we will be looking at that in ongoing reporting, but I would encourage, following on from Katrina's question, I think encourage an acceleration of timelines be appropriate. Katerina.
Thank you very much for the report and for the editorial, Andrew. Really appreciate that. I have to say this report did also give me pause, and I kind of had to think. So I appreciate that you state that you have not identified failures or any instances where Police Scotland weren't complying with the legislation. But obviously the focus is on the governance element of the framework. Now, my question is, given taking all the recommendations together, because there's actually a number of different elements around roles and responsibilities, around monitoring, around performance reporting, etc. Now, given taking all of this together, do you think that the Chief Constable can actually reasonably demonstrate that he's fulfilling his role as the accountable officer, obviously from a health and safety perspective? So is there enough of a governance structure in place to enable Chief Constable to be absolutely sure to just to be able to say everything is okay from a health and safety perspective in our organization?
I think that the question kind of cuts at the heart of on what basis is that statement being made. In carrying out the review, I think what we tended to find was it wasn't that necessary activities weren't taking place. It was just sometimes that we had to do a bit of digging, talk to quite a few different people, do a bit of a kind of exploration to really be able to substantiate that it was happening. Everybody involved is confident it is, and it's part of James's role, for example, to be confident that those things are happening. When you're closer to the work in that way, you will make different judgments about what substantiates that. So our observation, and this comes to the reporting element of it, is if we as auditors are not finding it easy to get that kind of substantiation to independently satisfy ourselves, it's going to be difficult for a governance group to do the same, particularly because we can be a bit, as auditors, we can be a bit inquisitorial. We can go make and ask targeted questions, follow-up questions, seek clarification, seek specific information. Governance groups, I think, have the ability to do that, but maybe a bit less scope and a bit less time to do so. So I would say it's for the Chief Constable to make that decision as to how he's drawing that assurance. But I would put it in the context of those different areas. It's difficult for us from the outside to come in and look at what's going on and draw assurance from it. The Chief Constable will be closer to that. He will have a closer relationship with the people involved, who in turn have a quite close relationship to the work being carried out. So I would make a different judgment likely from the Chief Constable. Not to say I would necessarily disagree, but we would have different bases to make that decision on.
It touches, does it not, on, we're talking audit risk and assurance. It's in that world of assurance and different lines of defence and how we, and it was exactly the same issue actually that came up with strategic planning, which is what is the assurance that the Chief Constable has from his internal processes, and then the assurance that the SPA committee and board have based on that. So something worth considering. I've got several hands up. So if it's, and I think it is perhaps DCC Taylor sort of giving the management element of this before I then go back perhaps to Katrina. Could that be the way to do it? DCC Taylor?
Thank you. And Katrina, thank you for the question. I chair on behalf of the Chief Constable National Health and Safety Board. And I think the point that both Alan and Andrew have made, are very pertinent. I think James and I have talked on a number of occasions about assurance mechanisms, reporting mechanisms. Us being able to reassure ourselves that organisationally, whilst this activity is being carried on, we have visibility around the fact that it is being carried on. Colleagues in the board this morning, the committee this morning, will notice that we have recently reparented health and safety from the sort of people and development business group into Alan Spears's governance and assurance business group, Katerina, and that is to ensure that we are focusing on policy, process, assurance, reassurance. The point that Alan made around actually, I suppose, does the organisation take health and safety? Does the organisation take health and safety seriously? Do I take my role as chair of the National Health and Safety Board seriously? Absolutely, I do. I think there was a very over the past sort of 2 years with COVID and COP26, there were some real practical necessities that mandated James and his team got into day-to-day tactical activity to ensure that our officers were safe when they were out during the pandemic, that they were safe when they were out policing the streets of Glasgow and across Scotland during COP26. We are now in a position where we can focus, and we are focusing on those policy, procedural, assurance sort of mechanisms. Again, to give you a couple of examples of that, I think I'm right in saying, James, we are only the second force police service in the country, which has introduced certificates of assurance, which now sit at chief superintendent level, Katrina, whether that's in a division or a department, which again gives me the reassurance that my senior leaders across the organisation understand what is expected of them in their particular parts of the business to enable them to keep our people, and indeed the people that we provide a service to, safe in a health and safety context. Again, that's been in place now, James, I think for 2 years, and it's maturing. And I think actually there's another theme there, Katrina, that a lot of the processes that we have in place are maturing. But I am confident that they are maturing, and that from my perspective is reassuring. The other point that I would make is piece around reporting, and again, this is a piece of work that James has generated anyway. I think we appreciate, when you look at the reports which go into whether it's People Committee or its predecessor, I think went to Resources Committee previously, there is a heck of a lot of information within those reports, and to Andrew's point, if you're right in amongst all of that, you get it, you understand it. If you're not, you probably actually need us to put that professional overlay and that support our sort of assurance bodies to gain the confidence that actually we are drawing through trends, we're drawing through we're drawing through themes, we're giving you that sort of comprehensive overview. We're actually assisting you to ask the questions that you need to ask to gain that assurance yourself. So there's a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment, and we're working again very closely with SPA officials, basically to totally overhaul our reporting mechanism into my health and safety board, into senior leadership board, which is chaired by the Chief Constable, again to the point that you raised, Katrina, about the Chief's confidence, and ultimately into people board, again to give that assurance to the SPA. So while yes, some of these deadlines are quite long, we will certainly look at them. I can assure you that there is a plough of work going on, both in actually delivering that health and safety function across the organisation, but also making sure that we are reporting upon it properly. Thanks, Chair. Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer.
Not at all. I understand that, and I think that's very helpful. It is a theme that runs through, and I think we'll address also in the private session, which is there is clearly, and we have that with risk, a wealth of activity. It's about it is about the right reporting that and evidence that gives an assurance through this structure of governance. And I think there's always room for improvement. And I think that there are several areas where it is a good moment for reflection on how we are doing that across the piece. I think that's fine. We have the first of our integrated assurance statements to consider next, and next year it will look even better, I'm sure. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. And some of the questioning that I was going to go down has actually been covered by the helpful comments by DCC Taylor. The area that I just wanted to explore was we've heard for a long time from DCO Page that there are constraints on the estate, dealing with the estate, which the budget constraints only allow the health and safety aspects to be considered. And so I was really wondering how the flow of information coming through of identifying an issue at an estates element is then flowing through James Bertram's department activities, so that actually anything that is significant is being dealt with on a timely basis.
David Page.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Grant, for the question. To be fair, the budget that we allocate to the estate does cover a bit more than just health and safety, but it always takes the first cut of actually not just the health and safety budget. When we're doing the entire budgeting process, anything that's health and safety across any work stream effectively is statutory and regulatory requirements, and health and safety fits as one of those. In terms of how do we make sure that we do the right things in the health and safety arena, James Bertram and his team work very closely with Phil Collard and my estates team. We've also got contracts out with Mighty and Sodexo who carry out health and safety, fire inspections and the like, and James and his team work to ensure that the standards that are being applied meet our standards. So there's a well tried and well trusted team approach between ourselves, our contractors and James' team, but we do ensure that health and safety gets the right priority, and it is, as I say, always the first capital allocation, and that's James's priority, my priorities, Fiona's as the national chair, my priority is being responsible for estates and fleet, which is where a lot of the kind of health and safety risk lies. So I'm happy to kind of confirm that we do allocate sufficient funding to address those issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's very reassuring, David, and that's what I expected you to say. But I wanted to be sure that when we're looking at this area as a whole, it was important to be sure that this was being covered as well.
Right, I'm going to take, if I may, one last comment from Fiona Taylor, because we are slipping slightly in terms of time. Important issue. I don't want to cut this off, but Fiona.
So I will be very brief, Chair. Again, Grant, it was just to give you the reassurance. David's people deliver that effect across our estate. I hold them to account for it through the National Health and Safety Board, and I think it's probably fair to say that it's one of those boards where Phil Collard really does have to earn his salary, because the questioning around fire risk assessments, around the health and safety provisions within our custody estate are always front and centre at the National Health and Safety Board. So there is, if you like, that internal assurance, to support the activity that David and his colleagues are engaged in. But I would, Chair, just like to commend the work that James and his team does. Alan said it's a small team. We were a large organisation. They are consummate professionals, and we will certainly look to discharge the recommendations within the internal audit report. But I wouldn't like us to overlook the power of work that they are doing on our and the people of Scotland's behalf.
No, I absolutely don't underestimate, and if I were looking at strategic workforce planning, I think you might be actually putting in a bid for some additional resource. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. That takes us on to the internal audit annual report from Gary Devlin, and it is interesting, I don't want to preempt Gary, but how many of the themes that we have been discussing in this meeting are actually identified and pulled out in the internal audit report. So it feels very timely, and I may say. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and delighted to present our annual report on the audit. Those key themes are key themes that you can see emerging in the report, and I'll just touch on those. But overall, this is a really positive annual report from internal audit on the control environment within Police Scotland. I would just note a few themes from that. So we have undertaken 500 days of work, and if you look at the table in the report on the coverage in those 500 days, it spanned a significant number of themes and areas, from estates, finance, health and safety we've just heard about, forensic services, a whole swathe of assurance through those reporting mechanisms. And I have to say, really well supported by the management teams of both Police Scotland and the SPA, who really do pay serious attention to the work of internal audit, as does the committee. And you can see through the meeting today how seriously the work of internal audit and the recommendations from internal audit's work are taken. Just to cover a few of the key areas, we do comply with public sector internal audit standards, and we get external audit externally assessed on the quality of our work in complying with those standards. That's a feature of our work. We completed the audit plan by the end of March, so within the calendar year, and that's the first time we've been able to say that. That's a significant achievement. And we are providing an opinion which provides reasonable assurance on the adequacy of the internal control systems within the whole of Police Scotland. Given the complexity of Police Scotland, that's a really significant achievement as well. And that's about the highest level of assurance that internal audit will ever give, because we can't cover everything. So we're only able ever to provide reasonable assurance. There are no red-rated risks within our report. That's the first time that's also happened. And I think that also demonstrates the direction of travel and overall governance within the organisation. And finally, for me, we do cover some key themes. So we are drawing attention to some issues around governance, around reporting, particularly around performance reporting, how those join up across the organisation, and really around the ICT area. So again, it's all linked. It's about how you use technology to inform management decision making and performance reporting within the overall business. We have met, there's a section on our KPIs. We have met the majority of our KPIs, but there were a small number of reports where it just took a little bit longer to clear management responses. Things like strategic planning. I don't think that is a significant factor in the overall performance of internal audit. We delivered everything on time. On that basis, I'm very pleased to present that report to the Audit Committee and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Gary, could I just, for the avoidance of doubt and clarity, the highest level of assurance within the whole of Police Scotland and the SPA? It is a report that covers, because if I reflect back, we've had occasions in our past where there was a distinction between the two, but you're not drawing a distinction. I think it's...
I'm not drawing a distinction. I'm providing assurance on the internal control environment for the SPA, Police Scotland and Forensic Services, so for the whole of that area, and I'm providing reasonable assurance on the adequacy of the internal control environment based on the work undertaken. That's a really strong report from internal audit.
Yeah. No, thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to say, for the avoidance of doubt, because that was inferred. So thank you very much. And indeed, yes, congratulations to everybody concerned. I think that it's the first time within the year that the internal audit plan has been completed. The internal audit opinion is being produced now. No red risks. As you say, the highest level of assurance. And I think I'm pleased to see that you also picked out, as has been referred to earlier in the meeting, the arrangements for COP26, which was a sort of standalone of a completely different order from anything else, and to actually manage to combine those, I think.
Yes, it's hard to remember some of the, not remember, but In the whole scheme of things, there have been some really significant achievements for Police Scotland in the year, and that's just been one of them.
Yeah.
Police Scotland and the SPA, I should say, rather than Scotland.
Everybody has the COVID challenge, and I recognise the COVID challenge, but this was a very particular challenge, and I'm pleased to see the positive comments on that. So, any comments or questions, first of all, from committee members, from Grant, Katrina, Katerina? I'm sure you're not going to challenge it. Grant.
I'm not going to challenge it. I would just say I'm delighted to read it. It's very positive, and I am delighted we've got to this stage. It's well done from many people in getting there. So congratulations, and thanks to Assets.
Yep. Katrina.
Yes, just to add my voice to that. It's impressive.
Good. Thank you. Yes, I think that's a good adjective to use. Absolutely. Katerina, I think.
Absolutely nothing additional to add other than, yeah, it is impressive. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And Gillian, woman from Audit Scotland, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I are planning for your audit will take this into account. I think that can we confirm?
Yes, Chair. So just to say, this report is a very positive reflection of the systems of internal control in place in SPA, Police Scotland and the Forensics Service. We will absolutely be taking account of the findings. We pay particular attention to all of the individual reports as they come out. You'll know that we have a particular interest in all of those associated with financial statements, but also with the wider scope of the public sector audit model in Scotland. We do pay attention to all of the other reports as they support our work on the wider dimensions and our reporting in due course. And I would also make the observation, and I know the reference has been made to the global pandemic and the extent to which that has impacted on all public services. So in that context, that is a very strong achievement. But also, I can't help but reflect that the auditing profession themselves has had a really challenging 12 months for a whole host of reasons. So the fact that your internal auditors were able to sustain the level of input without interruption throughout those 12 months is also, I can tell you, quite an achievement as I look at the wider profession in the United Kingdom. Thanks.
Thank you. No, that's a very helpful additional layer of confirmation. So I think, goodness me, this is turning into an orgy of congratulation. How gratifying to see. But that's very good indeed. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on then to the final segment that we're going to consider in the public session, which is assurance reporting. That sort of picks up some of the issues we've been talking about and gives us a bit more detail. And John, you're going to introduce what is our very first integrated assurance statement. And as usual, you can assume the committee have read this, although this is the first occasion we've seen it. So if you'd like to just speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. And as you say, this is the first time we prepared this report. Its genesis is really going back to the ARAC we had last autumn, where we provided our first strategic assurance map. And this really takes that to a conclusion for the financial year. I mean, as you all appreciate, the SPA, Police Scotland, is a huge and complex organisation. So what this report is trying to do is bring together all the different and wide range of assurance sources that you have into a single, relatively simple strategic overview for the benefit of members and also our accountable officer. You'll see the report's based on our 4 lines of defences model, and in fact, even just from this meeting, you probably recognise a few of those assurance sources cropping up through our internal audit opinion, committee effectiveness later in the agenda, and also much more input this year from HMICS, which has been really welcomed. I think in drawing to a conclusion, the report says we have a reasonable level of assurance that we're able to draw based on all those different sources of assurance over the year. And I use that sense of reasonable assurance based on following what Gary and Azets have also said, we cannot provide ever absolute assurance on the internal control framework. But what this report sets out is a range of different sources of assurance at so many levels in this organisation, such that we're able to conclude that there are effective arrangements over the internal control systems at the SPA, Police Scotland and Forensic Service. And that's all I was going to highlight, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Katrina.
Yes, thank you very much. I genuinely really enjoyed reading this. You describe it as simple. Elegant is another word that's been used about it. It's very clear. It is simple, but it does give you detail, and it is very reassuring, because you think, well, yeah, we do have all those routes to assurance. So thank you very much, John.
Okay, thank you. Katerina, anything from you?
I really appreciated seeing the first iteration of it, obviously last year, as John alluded to, and just to echo what Katrina's just said, it is very reassuring to see everything in one place. So well done.
Grant?
Same from me. I think it's actually extremely good practice to be able to pull all these different strands together and demonstrate it in a very clearly articulated way. How the conclusion has been reached. So I think that's excellent, very good practice, and yeah, well done to John for pulling it all together.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, absolutely, I would agree with that, John. And this is not a criticism in any way, but it's just because, I like to stretch the SPA staff, whether actually you think there are any areas in which we could expand or improve next year. And in a sense, you don't have to answer that now, but I think that is something that in its own development assessment of effectiveness, the committee might be looking at to see whether there are any gaps or areas to expand, whether there are new risk dimensions, areas in prospect. I can think of one or two that there are. Yeah. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment also very favourably. So adding to your theme of today, thank John for his comments on the work that we have done together on this. And I've got to say, this is the first time I've seen anything like this across policing in the last sort of 10 or 15 years. I've got to say I'm very impressed with the work, the attention to detail, and the drive to show that continuous improvement across the 4 areas of defence. So I just want to thank you for that, and to pay compliments to John for the work he's done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Good. Gillian, I don't know if you want to offer anything. Is this something you would be looking at, or are you more looking at the independent internal audit opinion?
So coincidentally, and you might not be surprised to know that during the meetings I stay in touch with my senior audit manager, Stephanie Harold, who's also online, and we've already had an exchange about considering, you'll know we're encouraged through our annual audit reports to draw out examples of good practice for sharing more widely. So we have identified this particular document as a potential for our reporting. I think I really took note of the expression about its elegance as well as its simplicity and so on, because you want it to be engaging to a very wider range of people to also be assured. So I think it's very accessible in that regard, and people can relate to the content. So we absolutely do pay attention ultimately to how the accountable officer has received assurances in order to sign the annual governance statement, which is a key part of your financial statements in due course, and which is subject to audit by the external audit team. So thanks for that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed. Well, and thank you, John, who has been absolutely the driving force in this. And so our final item for consideration in this public session is a paper of slightly different ilk, which is a data ethics governance framework. I mean, we have heard throughout this meeting and previous about the importance of data quality, and data ethics has also been identified as an issue of extreme importance. So we have allowed, and we are on track in terms of time, we've allowed 20 minutes for this, Dennis. Now, it is a very dense paper. In fact, I think it was 195 pages. So I think you can assume we have all read it. However, we certainly can't walk through it page by page. So if you'd just like to pick out a couple of highlights and what are the key questions that you might be asking the committee, as well as the committee then asking you questions. So if I can maybe invite you to restrict yourself to perhaps 7 minutes on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got with me Dennis Hamill, who's our Chief Data Officer. We've been doing a significant amount of work around ethics over the last 18 months, and particularly over the last 12 months in the space that is data ethics. And we've been working in partnership with the Centre for Data Ethics, which is a Home Office sponsored team. And I would contest that the work that we've done with them probably puts us far ahead of the majority of forces across the UK in terms of data ethics. And in fact, the Centre for Data Ethics want to take the template that we have now produced and try to use that as a model for rolling that out across the UK. So on a really positive note, we've done an incredible amount of work. Cognizant of the volume of detail that's in there, I've asked Dennis just to summarise in the 6 minutes that I've left him, Chair. He'll share a couple of slides on the screen, which will maybe be an easier way to understand the theme and probably trigger some questions from there. So thanks very much, Dennis, and I'll just hand over to yourself.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jane. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to take a liberty just to share those slides just now, because very conscious, as Jane said, there's a lot of material in the proposals. So I'll quickly move through. So essentially, the objective of this is really to for Police Scotland to act on its aim to become this an organisation driven by the effective and efficient use of data in an ethical way, and that has to be, we have to have something to demonstrate we're doing that, and we actually identified there was a gap. We would really need a sort of data ethics governance framework to ensure that we could identify and address any ethical considerations that have been posed by the use of data-driven technology, and I'll come back to that definition in a moment. As Alan said, we have been working with the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. They are thought leaders in this space, and we recognised we needed some support there, and it has been a hugely beneficial partnership for both partners. And they already have a bit of a background working with the NPCC and organisations like RUSI around the use of analytics and algorithms in policing, predominantly in England and Wales. So I'll just move you forward. So in terms of the scope's quite key. So we're using this, as we're saying, a deliberately broad term, data-driven technology. So if you're thinking there, does that cover new and emerging technologies? Yes, it does. So what about any sort of AI and machine learning? Yes, it does. Any type of predictive analytics. And in fact, we broadened this out to really cover any sort of technology that was sort of dependent on or based on the availability of data or generated new data. So that actually covers pretty much most sort of traditional technology solutions you'd come through. But we do recognise there's a wider ethics piece, and I know we're working with Scott Ross around that. Maybe what about things that are not data-driven technology? Right? But for this piece of work, the scope is very much data-driven technology, which in my opinion is extremely broad. So in terms of an approach, we're recognising in terms of the context, most organisations, whether it's public or private, are looking to try and get a better use of data. That's difficult in a really increasingly complex data environment. Most organisations like that. So we remind you have about 800 plus systems, traditional IT systems. We estimate hundreds of millions of unstructured data files, still got tens of millions of bits of paper, hard copy. And that's just our internal systems. We make a lot of use of external systems. There's an increase in more sort of smart devices and a streaming of data. It's getting more and more complex, and therefore, actually, what we're seeing is emerging technologies, more advanced technologies to help you make sense of all of that data. So, but what we want to do is to try and get, ahead of the game, essentially, to ensure that we have the right foundations, the right processes to ensure that we are using data responsibly. And there is a balance here around, this. We have an obligation, an ethical obligation to use data if it can prevent harm. However, what if it potentially by certain groups? What if we move down a track of replacing human or officer decision making rather than assisting that? What if we impacted public confidence in doing that? So there's a balance here to be made, and we needed a sort of governance framework to try and manage us through that. So the governance framework is the main sort of the main meat of this proposal, and there's two parts of it. First one is around sort of good practice around governance and transparency and engagements, etc. And the second part is a practical guide, more of a toolkit, a set of questions that we would ask a project through the lifespan of that project as they're introducing new data-driven technologies to ensure that they're using data responsibly. So that's quite a substantial step forward, and sometimes a picture can do better than 1,000 words. In this case, I hope it's the case. Here's a sort of conceptual process flow of that process. So what we're doing is step one is for all projects, we'll go through a data ethics assessment, like an impact assessment. That will then move into a triage step two, where we will work with the project, and we have 11 questions. I'll show you one in a minute, which will help identify the risk from an ethical perspective around the use of that data. So every project is going to go through that. We've been trialing that in a sort of soft pilot for the last few months, and that's going to go live this month, this data ethics triage. For those that have been identified as high risk only, we will then take that through a more detailed ethics framework through the lifespan of the project. So post business case into design, build, test, deployment. Both from an internal perspective, so we're going to set up additional internal scrutiny and an independent scrutiny, which we'll come to in a moment as well. So we think it's really, really important to ensure that level of transparency. And finally, our sort of an ongoing review stage, because depending on some of these technologies require that actually the risk does not end once you've deployed it. But we'll get into details of that. So these 11 questions that we've got for the triage stage, just to give you a flavour for this, we've tried to introduce a level of objectivity without over-engineering it. So there's a question here: how novel is the project? So on the low end of the spectrum might be, well, similar projects being implemented by multiple other police services, no significant problems or controversies. Could be maybe rolling out mobile devices. It could be some basic text analytics. On the other end of the spectrum, high is something that's completely novel to us, or even to any police service. Or maybe other police services have implemented this service but experienced substantial problems or controversies. Obvious things like live facial recognition is on that high spectrum. So we've got a set of 11 questions that we can easily ask projects, easily work with projects to try and determine that risk. And then the key thing is that for the ones that are high risk, we'll take them through a more detailed process. So one thing I want to touch upon is just the recent MOU. Obviously we have very similar aims here around trying to identify anything that might have an impact on public confidence or public perceptions. There's a statement in the MOU to try and use existing governance processes. We want to use the ethics triage process as the mechanism to identify from a change perspective, what projects might impact public confidence. So that's pretty much what will come out of that process, a repeatable process that we can identify that this project might need a bit of extra governance, extra scrutiny. So just almost to finish here, just to summarise the recommendations, we've got 5 recommendations. One is to implement the data ethics triage process, which, as I say, is going live this month. The second one is an internal scrutiny group within Police Scotland for those ones that to scrutinise those high-risk data-driven projects. The third one is an external scrutiny group that was independent independent attendees. That'll be, you know, but also actually a key point here is as we are proposing this to be managed by the SPA itself to give that independence. Transparency, so that in there is things like, well, we want to create a public register of data-driven technology so that we're being completely transparent on what Police Scotland is using and what it's not using. And finally, from an implementation perspective, this would be baked into our BEU change governance process. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're baking this in so that every new business case will go through that triage. So next steps, we're currently at the red stages here. So we're working particularly with Scott Ross around trying to socialise the proposals with the SPA. This is another further step in here. The obvious questions are probably around that external scrutiny group. What does that involve? What role does the SPA play in there? We're also currently we're refining and piloting the process. And once the data triage process goes live, we will set up that internal scrutiny group. As ACC Spears also mentioned, this has been submitted. A generified version of this has been submitted to the NPCC, and the likelihood is that's going to become a national standard. So that hopefully is that in a nutshell. I'm going to stop there and open, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully I haven't taken up too much time.
Not too much, slightly overrun. And to be fair, I didn't advise you in advance. So I do have some questions which I want to come to at the end about the governance arrangement and the oversight, because it seems to me, if you look back to what we've just been discussing, much of this is essentially first line of defence. And I think it's how we roll out. But just in terms of what you've presented very clearly, very helpfully, any questions or comments? Now, Katrina.
Yes, thank you very much. That was really helpful summary of the paper. The paper itself is, well, I'm going to be really honest here and say I probably need to read it at least another 2 or 3 times before I can really, get to grips with all of it. It's a really interesting piece of work. It's an area that we're all interested in this age of big data and technology-driven data as well as data-driven technology. It's a really, really important one. I've got 3 questions, one note. 2 of the questions are quite simple, really. I mean, you've touched on where we are in terms of the process. These are obviously drafts. So my first question really is, what will be the next steps in terms of solidifying the drafts? I mean, is there still further adjustment going to happen? Is it still open for any kind of review? So that was my first question. My second question is, once it's actually agreed, is it going to be used to retrospectively look at some of the data sets that are already in place? So I'm thinking specifically of things like the vulnerable persons data set. Will this be then taken to that and gone, does this actually meet these ethical requirements? I wanted to note, and Jane's mentioned it, note the discussion around the independent ethics groups. I mean, you've listed a lot of questions there, and they are questions that need to be discussed and obviously agreed. Very importantly, really, in terms of the balance between advisory, but also assurance and confidence. The more complicated question I wanted to ask was really about, it's something to do with language, but it's also around culture and the you also mentioned about embedding and sort of transformational change across the body. I get quite nervous. I get quite nervous when I read things like, well, I've lost it now. About doing the right thing, being the right people, doing the right thing, asking the right questions, because those are all very subjective terms and very contextual terms. So it's what is the right thing, and so I would say, what are the right questions to what purpose? And there's something around the trust in the process and the use of the language and how you communicate what you're doing in this. And I'm going to just give a little example of what I mean by that. So you talked about certain bodies being disadvantaged in terms of maybe not being included in some of this data collection. I think also there's another side to that, which you know, if the culture is not seen to be, you know, truly inclusive and equitable, certain people, for example, people with protected characteristics, might actually fear the purpose of collecting data about them. And I think that's something that actually needs to be, I think it's really, it's really important to address that. I think if you want that public confidence, you need to look at the language. Now, one of the things I noticed in your diagram project life cycle on page 14 is you start off by talking about problem identification. Now, that's very straightforward. You're identifying a problem. What are we going to do about it? But sometimes when you're asking research questions, it's not so much that you're identifying a problem, you're identifying questions that you need to ask that are going to lead you to the positive outcome you want. And I wondered whether talking about positive outcomes is actually something that, you know, should be part of this discussion and this narrative. And I'll give you another example of where I'm coming from. Sorry?
Wonder, Katrina, if there are about 4 or 5 different.
Oh, right. Okay, I just wanted to clarify my question. Sorry.
Right, but I wonder if we could break that down a little, because I think some of what you're saying is around the framework. Some of it, I mean, and those absolute first questions about next steps, about retrofitting, about there are, I think, a whole load of issues around. So a whole load of issues. There is a consideration we need to have, exactly as you said, around what is the function of any independent group, and how that fits into the chain of assurance, as it were, and whether such an independent group is advisory or part of the formal assurance, and then the reporting up to us. And I think that final point you're making, which I think is not actually addressed in this, but I think is part of both the design and the implementation, which is around the communications and about how the communications and the engagement flows through this, and for the public confidence. Is that?
That's really well summarised, Jane. Thank you. But I think part of that will be how this is actually framed, the language that is used, and because that will also inform how people approach building those data sets, you know, and asking what the questions are. And the wee example I wanted, it's not a wee example, it's a big example I wanted to give, which is partly where I'm coming from. In psychology is about addressing problems. But the problem is they then address populations of people as problem people, and that's the bit I'm trying to get at. If you talk about problems always in people's heads, the group of people that you might be talking about then become the problem, as opposed to what you're actually working towards as a positive outcome for those people.
So I think the observation would definitely be the action, as it were, is reflection on the use of language.
And communication,
in the design process, as it were, and the further communication as you use it. But that whole communications strand, which is, I think there's really, really useful points. Thank you. I wonder, could we go back, Dennis, just those 2 initial questions that Katrina posed, which she said were simple, and maybe.
Well, they're simpler to answer, I think, than the last one, because I think the last one is quite nuanced, and I totally agree with all the comments. I think language is really, really key, and so that'll be an ongoing challenge, I think, and so we'll evolve that. The first one, next steps from an internal perspective. We are going to launch the data ethics triage process this month. That'll go live. All new business cases go through that. Great. And we've tested that out and had really good positive feedback from the projects. And then we'll move on to setting up this sort of internal scrutiny body for those projects that have been identified as high risk. So we think that'll be in the small minority, maybe about a 10 to 20% of projects, crudely. But in parallel, the next key step is this independent group. So that's really key for the whole proposals. And given, you know, we've spoken to West Mids Police, who are probably easily by far the most advanced police force from a data ethics perspective. They've had an independent group set up for probably about 2 years, and we've taken advice on their lessons learned. And that's why part of the proposals is for that it would not be run by Police Scotland, be run by the SPA, and we would then, so that's probably our big. This is where we probably need the most support to try and figure out, well, what does that look like? So we have actually in the proposals got suggested terms of references, etc. That's largely come from West Mids. But how does that get set up? Who's going to attend that? How does that report up through the SPA committee structure? To be determined. I was saying that's where I'm leaning heavily on Scott at the moment. So that's probably our immediate next steps. And the second question about retrospective, we're not planning to do this retrospectively, so it will be a bit of a sort of draw the line in the sand and everything moving forward. That's, you know, that's largely partly because we do think it's a new process. We need to get this right for moving forward, but also it's just a bit of a capability in terms of the bandwidth. If we spent an awful lot of time on historical initiatives, if there was something it's not to say we couldn't do a triage on a particular historical existing system. We could do that. That's maybe an easier one, but we're not planning to do a retrospective sweep across the environment.
I think, Katrina, do you?
Oh yes, just very briefly. No, thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. And yes, I mean, I think that there might be one or two sort of data sets that could do with that kind of high, just a kind of triage, and just have a really good look at whether you've got the right data and there's a good it's a good set.
Yeah, it occurs to me that given the emphasis we put, go back to strategic planning, implementation, the need for measures, outcomes, evidence-based, data-based outcomes, that again, linking it to the new strategy for reduction of violence against women and girls, that would be an area, because I do commend the idea of a targeted retrofit for some specific data set, as opposed to, I can quite understand, not the retrospective sweep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can I also just say, sorry, just Chair, but just could say, it's obvious there's a huge amount of work gone into this, and I think I failed to say that at the beginning. It's really, really interesting. There's a huge amount of work going on. I was actually really interested to see a lot of what you're planning, and the whole idea of the triage and the independent group. I mean, so I really do congratulate you, if you like, on where we're at with this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I said I wanted to pick up at the end, and I will therefore allow see if Grant and Katerina have anything. But on that independent group recommended to be run by the SPA, I think I'd like perhaps a view from the chief executive of the SPA, because that's something that's gone from the internal straight up to here, and I think it probably it might need a bit of reflection on how. Yes, I'm not sure that it's for this committee to welcome, but actually what we do with that, as it were. Lynn, do you want to come in at this point? Sorry. You're breaking up a little.
Can you hear me better now?
Not really.
It shows that you're still on mute, Lynn.
No,
yes.
I've got a special device. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
No.
Yes, is that better, Chair?
Much better.
Yeah, John and I are sharing a very technologically advanced speaker that obviously isn't working, so sorry about that. So yes, I think we need to take this away. My understanding, this report's just for noting. This is quite a a big recommendation that needs to be thought through, I think. And I'd actually noted down briefing with Scott Ross, who's been leading on that from SPA, just get a better understanding. So if you're content with that, I'd like to get a better understanding of what's actually involved. And obviously it would come back to the appropriate governance arrangements within the SPA for a decision.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grant. Katerina.
No, keep it on.
Grant, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, that's the first time today. Thanks, Jane. Apologies for the not being on mute. The only thing I would just like to endorse is I think it's a very helpful paper, and I think your slide pack, Dennis, was extremely helpful in bringing it all to life, rather than reading through many pages of text. Jane has already mentioned the importance of outcome measures and being able to track the journey, because you've described a huge number of different things, and I think one of the things that we would want to understand is how's the journey proceeding, and what's working well, what's perhaps not working at the pace you would like it to. And I think if we can find a way of actually articulating that and reporting that, I think that would be extremely helpful. Thank you, but well done.
Katerina, anything from you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. From my perspective, I think some of my questions and concerns kind of have already been addressed and discussed. I would like just to say at this stage that it is incredibly good that we are talking about this, because we can't go forward without these considerations. So just, to give you credit for the fact that this is something that is being developed. Having said that, I think the discussion just now demonstrated with Katrina's excellent kind of expert views and opinions. I think the detail of it probably still needs to be refined. And again, I'm really encouraged that there is obviously that close engagement with our officers. So I think there is probably a lot of the considerations and the thoughts that we've just all been kind of considering and expressing that can be taken offline and pursued through other channels. But just from my perspective, it is incredibly positive that this work is happening. But the devil will be in the detail. And we now have a great opportunity to get a really good setup. And it is encouraging that there is already some proof of concept, etc. So you're already starting to get some of the more, I suppose, real-time data in terms of what's working, what's not working. But I do think it is really important to get the setup right before a full scale launch is done. So, but yeah, I know it's being progressed through the right channels. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much indeed. I mean, we were invited to discuss the contents of the paper. We're not invited to make a decision. And I think in summary, we are extremely encouraged I think we welcome the whole initiative, the whole approach, the recognition of how important an issue it is, all of the work that has gone into this. There are, as has been said, some areas of detail to tease out in terms of the design, the communication. We would like to see how this advances. And so in essence, I think the next stage of the project, and I do think there is some consideration for us, which is a theme throughout this meeting actually, of how this is best overseen, how the SPA are best cited. This is a really good citing. How we exercise the appropriate oversight, not disproportionate oversight. It's not for us to actually engage in the operational. I get the assurance that from this work that we are all looking for in terms of our compliance, and indeed be on the front foot of considering the ethical dimension of data. I think that's probably where I am. So there's a lot of work for you to do and reflection for us. I think immensely valuable work, and look forward to following that up. Thank you very much. Okay.
Can I just say thank you very much for all the comments? Really useful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So that brings us simply to the final item of this public session, which is a work plan. And I think probably most of the items that we need to consider are reflected there. I think possibly we will reflect some more at the end of the private session. I suspect there are one or two more topics to be added to that, but otherwise we seem to have covered everything. And at the moment, just an alert, I think, that our next meeting is scheduled for the 15th of July, but I know there are one or two difficult diary issues, so it's just possible we may have to reschedule that. But we will do that. We will be looking at that as speedily as possible. And the meeting after that will be the September meeting, which we consider the annual report and accounts. And I think I see Gillian nodding, and I hope that is true. We are on track. Currently, we are on track for that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you all very much indeed. And thank you for exemplary timing. I hope everybody feels they had the opportunity to contribute within the timescale. So that's the end of the public meeting. Those of us who are joining for the private session